If I were to run a poll about the most popular SUV in India, I'm quite certain that the Toyota Fortuner will feature among the top 3 names on that list. Well, that's just how popular the Fortuner is. In fact, the Fortuner has more or less been ruling the premium 7-seat SUV segment for a decade, and it's only now in its second generation that the Fortuner is feeling the heat from the Ford Endeavour, which has turned out to be the better SUV overall in its current avatar. That said, the Fortuner continues to rule sales charts, but now it must fend off a fresh challenge from the Mahindra Alturas G4. The Alturas G4 has turned out to be very impressive on a lot of fronts that matter to SUV buyers in this segment, like road presence, space, comfort, an elaborate feature list and more. But can it take the Fortuner head on? Let's find out. But before we dive into what both SUVs bring to the table, let's take a look at their design first. And talking about design, SUVs probably don't get more real than this. The Fortuner and Alturas are both big and imposing looking, and both boast lots of road presence given their dimensions, but there is a significant difference in their design languages. The Fortuner is sharper and more butch looking, while the Alturas has a softer, more elegant stance. The Alturas is also longer, which makes it look shorter, though in reality it is slightly taller than the Fortuner. The Fortuner's headlamp design is aggressive, and the aggression is accentuated further by thick strips of chrome on either side of its grille. In comparison, the headlights and grille on the Alturas are simpler looking, but they do look eye-catching. The Fortuner's shoulder line has a sharp kink at the C-pillar, which adds more flair to the sides, while the Alturas uses sharp character lines above both wheel arches to the same effect. Similarly, the Fortuner's tail lights are positioned higher, which makes for a taller stance as compared to the Alturas. There's a significant difference in terms of the interior design of both SUVs too, and the Alturas here feels more modern and a lot more luxurious in comparison to the Fortuner. The quilted leather on the seats, the door panels and the dashboard here especially adds a lot to the interior design and makes it look a lot more appealing. And in fact, the overall layout of the cabin is such that you could easily mistake the Alturas for a far more expensive SUV. The Alturas G4 is sold as the SsangYong Rexton G4 internationally, and SsangYong has designed its interiors very thoughtfully. The choice of materials and surface finishes like the quilted leather and brushed metal make for a rich feel inside, along with the dual-tone color scheme for the seats. The 8-inch infotainment screen looks crisp and bright, which adds to the upmarket feel, while the center console looks classier than the Fortuners. The instrument cluster in the Alturas is also the better looking one thanks to its more modern design, as also the crisp looking 7-inch display nestled in between, which offers lots of information. What's more, the Alturas also comes equipped with an electric sunroof, something the Toyota misses out on. The Fortuner's interiors feel a lot more functional in comparison, and while the layout and the design of the cabin is good, the Fortuner simply does not feel as luxurious as the Alturas from inside. The Fortuner's all-black interiors look sporty, but rob it of the sense of spaciousness. The design of the center console here is also a lot more basic, and while there's generous use of leather on the dash and center console both, the overall layout is not as appealing. The resolution of the infotainment screen is lower as well, and the colors are not as bright either. The Fortuner does get an additional glove box over the Alturas though, which is a cooled one. Its instrument cluster also integrates a digital display, and while it offers ample information, the display is not very crisp to look at. The front seats in the Alturas feel more spacious and comfortable, especially when it comes to spending long hours behind the wheel. The Alturas also has a little party trick up its sleeve in the form of ventilated seats for the driver and front passenger. And this is a feature that will be appreciated a lot, especially in Indian summers. Moving on to the second row of seats, the Alturas has a longer wheelbase, which translates to better interior space, but the second row seat in the Alturas is fixed and does not slide forward or backwards, which could be a problem. But with that said, there's good amounts of legroom and knee room, so I'm not really missing that function. And with that said, there is a distinct highlight about this second row here, which is the fantastic recline angle. Interestingly, the Fortuner offers you more legroom and knee room in the second row, and that's despite the fact that its wheelbase is over 100mm shorter. You can also slide this seat forward or backwards as you like, and apart from that, the seat back here reclines completely. Both SUVs come equipped with a third row of seats of course, and I just had to try them out. The third row in the Alturas is accessed by first flipping the second row seat back down, and then pulling a second lever to lift the seat up. Ingress is relatively easy, and once in, the Alturas also offers slightly better headroom and knee room, but I cannot imagine adults spending too much time there. Third row AC vents in the Alturas are also placed rather oddly on the right side, which could restrict airflow in case there's more than one occupant at the back. Getting into the Fortuner's third row is a quicker affair, as a single lever flips the seat back down and lifts the seat up as well. Ingress is not as easy as the Alturas though, and once in, headroom and knee room are also more restricted. Ventilation for the third row is better though, as there's two roof-mounted air conditioning vents here. Now, buyers spending 40 odd lakh rupees on an SUV today look for a lot of features and creature comforts, and the Alturas betters the Fortuner in this department too. Apart from offering Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connectivity as standard, its 8-inch touchscreen also doubles up as a display for the 360-degree camera, which is a segment first. The 360-degree view comes on by default when you are in reverse gear, but you can also turn it on by using a dedicated switch whenever you like. And while we are on the topic, I also need to mention that the Alturas comes equipped with front parking sensors too, something the Fortuner misses out on. There's an easy ingress and egress function as well, again seen only in more expensive SUVs, which slides the driver's seat forward or backwards every time you're getting into or out of the Alturas. The fog lamps are LED units, which also double up as cornering lamps, which is a boon. The Fortuner unfortunately does not get any of these features. Second row occupants in the Alturas also get a dedicated USB slot to charge devices, while the Fortuner only gets a 12-volt socket. The digital display in the Alturas also doubles up as a digital speedometer, and you can choose from an array of designs for it, and also turn the backlight for the analog tachometer and speedometer off if you like. The very same display also integrates a tire pressure monitoring system, a feature the Fortuner does not get either. That said, the Fortuner does get dedicated controls for the second and third row air conditioning vents, along with more effective roof-mounted vents, whereas the Alturas only get smaller vents integrated into the central front armrest. When it comes to opening the boot, I don't have to do anything to open the boot of the Alturas. I simply stand behind the SUV with the key in my pocket, and the boot opens itself. But that is not the case with the Fortuner. The Fortuner requires me to pull the key out of my pocket, press the button here, and that's when the boot opens. The Fortuner is powered by a 2.8-litre 4-cylinder diesel engine that offers 177 PS and 450 Nm of torque. The Alturas, on the other hand, uses a smaller 2.2-litre diesel engine that offers 180 PS and 420 Nm of torque. The Fortuner engine comes mated to a 6-speed automatic, while the Alturas uses a 7-speed automatic sourced from Mercedes-Benz. So on the powertrain front, both Despite having a smaller engine that makes lesser torque, the Alturas is the quicker of the two SUVs when it comes to acceleration, be it from standstill or through the gears, and that's something that was confirmed by a V-Box acceleration test. The Alturas engine is also smoother and a lot more refined than the Toyota engine, which makes for a quieter in-cabin experience on the go, which is also courtesy the excellent insulation in this SUV. A lot of credit for the sprightly feel offered by the Alturas engine is courtesy its significantly lower curb weight as compared to the Fortuner, as also the Mercedes-Benz sourced gearbox, which is quicker to respond to throttle inputs and puts engine power down better. And with that said, it is interesting to note that the Alturas was over a second quicker than the Fortuner in a 0 to 100 kmph acceleration test. As far as fuel efficiency is concerned, the two SUVs are on par with each other though, and return near similar figures in our city and highway efficiency tests. The Fortuner's engine feels noisier in comparison as it has a constant clatter throughout the rev range, which is typical of a diesel engine, apart from which, as you build revs, there's a bit of a noise from the intercooler as well. I feel the cabin insulation in the Fortuner could have also been better, as there's a lot of the engine noise that creeps into the cabin, especially when you're going faster on open roads. The Fortuner's engine also feels slow to respond to throttle inputs, but I feel that has more to do with the gearbox rather than the engine performance itself. In fact, every time you take your foot off the throttle, the engine goes into a bit of a coast mode, which means that you do not have any engine braking. That was all about how the SUVs drive on tarmac though. Now let's talk about their off-roading abilities. Both SUVs come equipped with proper 4-wheel drive systems that let you select 4-low mode via rotary knobs, so switching from 2 high to 4 high and then to 4 low is an easy affair in either SUV. But the Fortuner's ratios are lower, allowing it to crawl at slower speeds and also making for better load pulling capacities. So if another vehicle were to get stuck off-road, I'd pick the Fortuner over the Alturas to pull it out. It is not without reason that the Fortuner is a huge favorite amongst off-roaders. The second generation Fortuner has been an even bigger hit in that sense and is revered across the country as one of the most capable SUVs when it comes to mud plugging. It clearly betters the Alturas in this department with its higher approach and departure angles, which coupled with its low ratios and crawl speeds afford greater control and stability. The Alturas G4 though is not far behind, and in fact, its throttle response is smoother than the Fortuner's, which feels jerky in comparison. In terms of ride quality, the Alturas has the upper hand though, as it feels plusher going over bumps and potholes. The very same suspension setup also helps it feel more planted and more comfortable at high speeds on the highway as compared to the Fortuner. A lot of buyers might appreciate the lightness of the steering in the Alturas, but it lacks the kind of feel and feedback the Fortuner's hydraulically assisted steering system offers. Its suspension setup though makes it better suited to road trips with family as compared to the Fortuner, as the Alturas feels more settled and more composed at highway speeds. It is also the quicker of the two to settle down after you go through a pothole or rut, thereby making it the more comfortable of the two. The Alturas also perform slightly better than the Fortuner in a braking test as far as the numbers are concerned, but it is the Fortuner that offers a more sure-footed feel when braking from high speeds. The Fortuner's suspension setup is softer than the Alturas, which helps it off-road, but on tarmac, the suspension feels noisy as it is a little too soft, and every time you go over a bump or pothole, you're constantly wiggling in your seat, just like this. The Fortuner does not feel as planted or composed as the Alturas when it comes to cruising on open roads due to its soft suspension. In fact, it feels a little too sensitive to bumps and undulations at times, which robs it of a comfortable ride. But when it comes to handling, the Fortuner claws back some advantage by way of its steering system, which apart from offering better feedback, also feels more weighted in keeping with its large size. I also like the Fortuner's seating position better as you sit taller in it than in the Alturas. The Fortuner thus offers a better view of the road ahead and the edges of its hood, typical of a traditional SUV, while the Alturas, it feels more car-like from behind the wheel. This comparison test has turned out to be really interesting. The Fortuner has proved to us yet again why it is the best-selling SUV in its segment, and a lot of it has to do with its build quality and reliability. In fact, this very Fortuner that you see here has clocked over 35,000 kilometers, but neither does it look like it, nor does it drive like it. The Fortuner is also the most serious off-roader here, and that's one thing that helps it find favors with people who love to go off-road. So if mud plugging is your thing, the Fortuner is the SUV to look at. But the Mahindra Alturas G4 is definitely the better package overall. It pampers you a lot more with an even more elaborate feature list as compared to the Fortuner. It feels spacious, feels luxurious, and the engine and gearbox are refined enough to make it feel quieter on the go. That is a lot going for it. But what really tilts the scales in the favor of the Mahindra here is the fact that it costs almost 4 lakh rupees lesser than the Fortuner, and that is a lot of money. Well, it remains to be seen how the Alturas will age in comparison to the fantastic Fortuner. But as far as the winner of this comparison test is concerned, it has to be the Mahindra Alturas G4.